This is the Edge of Excellence, empowering people to shape the future. Let's inspire, innovate, and explore together. Hello, and welcome to Edge of Excellence, the podcast where we explore how leadership, culture, and technology can empower businesses to grow and thrive. I'm your co-host, Jess DeForge, and today's episode is all about cybersecurity. But not just the technical kind. We're digging into why real security starts with people and culture, not just systems and software. If you've ever thought of cybersecurity as strictly an IT issue, this episode might change your mind.
Hi, and I'm Bryon Beilman, also a co-host here, and joining us today is Russell Poovey, a senior consultant here at Iuvo. Russell has spent well over a decade in IT with deep expertise in cloud configuration, Linux, networking, and a true love for working with on-prem infrastructure. Whoa. But what sets Russell apart isn't just a technical skill, it's his ability to help clients understand how human behavior, communication, and culture shape the effectiveness of the security strategies. So in this conversation today, we're going to explore how to build a security-first mindset across your organization, what leaders often overlook when thinking about cybersecurity, and of course, how to empower your team to be the first line of defense. Russell, welcome to the Edge of Excellence.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, welcome, Russell. Happy to have you here. So I'm going to dive right in. And so we're talking about cybersecurity, but when people hear cybersecurity, they're often thinking of firewalls and passwords. What would you say is missing from that as far as a complete picture of cybersecurity?
People, really? I know that's the theme of our podcast today, but I mean, it's IT can do so much in protecting people from getting these attacks, but really the best defense is some good education and training on how to combat this yourself. Yeah. It's also very important to have some like pretty good processes in place for your company and like how you handle these incidences and how you inform your employees of what's going on and how you just punch list through all of the steps to prevent or quarantine attacks. And then I would say probably being able to pivot, if something you had done in the past had failed, then you need to rework your strategies and find something new that will work, hopefully better. And also not be afraid to try something new in the market for protecting it.
So what maybe makes me think of a little bit is you talked, the first thing you said is people. And so, within the security sphere where we have firewalls and stuff like that, and we had this phrase at Iuvo for a while, is turning people into human firewalls, right? To have them so educated and so that they are literally the ones who are blocking these requests, or they're not clicking on these links, or they're not doing things they shouldn't, that we've tried to protect them from. And they really persist on, I really need to click that link, whatever it may be. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you think back to like whenever I was a kid. I'm 36, and my parents or grandparents would tell me not to believe everything you see on the internet. And it's kind of flipped now. Like that generation is definitely clicking every link on Facebook, and like, and me on the other hand, I just delete every email. Like I just like, unless it's from somebody I know that is going to be sending me an email, I'm like, I don't need that. It's fine. We'll just delete it. So, yeah.
So Russell, you mentioned that, IT can go so far. Why is it important for business leaders to stop thinking of cybersecurity as just an IT problem?
Yeah, I mean, we live in such a modern day where everything runs on the internet, right? So it's not about just protecting the IT infrastructure itself from attacks and everything like that, but your entire business, right? Like you'll be hard pressed to find a business that can run today that is not going to be suffering downtime if their infrastructure goes down, right? Or their data gets encrypted from ransomware. Like you can't process orders, you can't ship out anything, and you can't do payroll. Like I mean, it's a company problem, not an IT department problem.
Right.
And when I feel like when you focus on it being a sole like IT department problem, you end up with lots of shortcomings in that problem, like proper budgeting and funding for the right tools to use. And you get a lot of accountability that doesn't get put where it needs to be put.
Now, do you have a story or an example that you could share where human behavior actually played a bigger role than technical failure when it came to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean the biggest one that everyone knows of is Target, right? Back in, when was that? 2013, I believe. Like Target got breached, right? But it wasn't Target itself that got breached. It was an attack on a like HVAC vendor, right? And so they had more access into Target's networks than they should have, and because the attacker gained access to them and was able to work their way up to Target's networks, then that it just cascaded into a bigger problem, right? More close to home, like earlier this year or last year, we had a client who fell for a phishing attempt, and the attacker used it's like token theft basically, and so they run through the login process, the employee does, and the attacker grabs the refresh token in their SSO authentication, and they can just constantly replay that token and just stay authenticated. The attacker just stayed quiet for a while, actually, just monitoring emails and figuring out where they wanted to attack. And eventually, the end result was they got one of their clients to change the pay to address for one of their bills and just mailed a check instead of their standard, like, we always do ACH. Like, why are we now switching to mailing a check? And the check went to some random house somewhere, and somebody picked it up, and it was gone and cashed, and not much you can do about it. They found out too late, and the errors there were nobody in that chain thought, why am I changing this accounts payable?
Yeah.
Like, no, there was no verification. There was no like proper conditional access policies to like keep the attacker from getting the information that he got. The client had some security posturing that they had set up, but not as in depth as they should have, right? And that fell back to the previous IT. There was always pushback for like, we need to enable these rules, or we need to do this, and it turned into well, we don't want to be inconvenienced with these steps, right? And these extra security precautions that we have. But after that, they were like, well, we'll just deal with it. It's good. we like these steps because that was a big check. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there's probably people listening, other businesses that would share that sentiment of like not wanting to deal with the hassle of all of these checks and balances to make sure that you're secure. But unfortunately, when you learn the lesson the hard way, you're then willing to do that.
And that brings up like another point that we always face is it's very important for leadership themselves to like want to follow these rules, because you are leadership. You are the example that you want your employees to follow, and the proper precautions you want to take, right? But if you have the CEO who's like, well, I don't want MFA because I don't want to have to type in another code, then everybody else is going to question like, well, why do I have to have it? Because he doesn't. So it's very important for leadership to actually take the initiative and like want to be as secure as they possibly can. So
well, it makes you think, Russell, that we're inside of, because we have such sensitive data and so forth, we and with our clients, right, we I think we have a very strong security posture inside. And I'm always that the token attack you talked about seems a little fairly sophisticated. We haven't had anything like that, but I do know that very often when I'm traveling or I get somebody in our company slacks me, says, by the way, you didn't really, you're not requesting this check or this whatever or this, and usually it's very obvious to the person, but they're letting us know like through another channel, like this is baloney, or if it's not, let me know because I will buy you 25 Apple gift cards and send them to whoever,
Yeah, we're always looking for those Apple gift cards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good example. Like you were just on vacation, what, 2-3 months ago in Brazil, was it?
Yeah, Costa Rica. Yeah,
Yeah, and you were trying to do some work like late at night, and you couldn't sign in to do it, and
yeah,
nobody was available to like help you get around the policy until the next morning. But
yeah. And
to
I love
me,
that.
I'm like, you should be on vacation. You shouldn't have been signing in. But whatever.
Yeah, one thing I had to do, but I realized, okay, our security, it knew I was coming from somewhere else. That shouldn't be. Why is Bryon now out there? And it worked. So I wasn't
Yeah,
disgruntled. I was like, okay, this worked. So
yeah,
and someone helped me out. So it was great.
yeah. And I mean, all of our clients today are really great and would never get upset that like they couldn't sign in because they're vacationing in France or something. But I've worked with some grumpy people in the past that it's like, oh, I'm gonna get a stern yelling at if he can't sign in while he's traveling. And it's that causes the exception to the security, and that causes the eventual downfall of your protections, because we're people. We forget that, oh, I allowed him to sign in from anywhere 3 months ago and I never re-enabled the policy because something else happened or another fire started or something like that, right? So it's important to just never try and make those exceptions without really good justification. So.
Yeah, no, very true. And using the example of Bryon, you're traveling and some of us getting messages about you asking for these random gift cards. My next question was around, what does a security culture look like? And I think that using this example, we can kind of explain that a little bit, in that so many of us got these random messages from Bryon that we needed these gift cards for clients, but it was very odd. It was an odd request. And so it triggered a response in all of us to verify, like, this seems strange, but let me just make sure this isn't legitimate. And I think, Russell, from the example you gave earlier, that was a missing piece. So there may have been people thinking, oh, this is strange. We don't typically pay this way, or we don't typically send checks, but no one then did this like extra step of verifying before taking action. And so can you go into a little more detail on what it looks like when a company does have a strong security culture?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with a couple of them fairly consistently. Most of our clients are pretty open to strong security. We do a lot of biotechs, and so they always kind of posture as like, well, we're going to submit to the FDA for something, so we have to follow these strict guidelines for the entire time. And it's so much easier if you just start from the beginning, even if you don't need the protections that you have currently, to just get used to that and start fresh. It's easier to like build a house from the ground up than like knock down several walls and like
Yeah.
add things on, right? Because you can plan it, you can figure out exactly where you want each room and things like that, right? But also in terms of culture, like just every employee being vigilant and trained quarterly on like new phishing attempts and processes that are just emerging every day, right? Keeping all of your leadership accountable and of the same standards, and then also just not shaming people for failing. Like, again, we are people. Like, we don't like to feel ashamed of how something went, right? And if you do, then you're less likely to report the incident that you fell for in a timely manner, right? So
Yeah. I think that also, in a cultural sense, I think that goes to like being in a company of psychological safety, where you're saying, okay, listen, and I try to share all my failures. I have so many; it would take a week. But like when you when you say, listen, I did this thing and I'm kind of worried about it because I don't know whether it compromises any security. Can we check it out? And you share that with people. People learn, oh, that happened to, I should be on the watch for that too. So the security, especially in security, all of this can be a real learning, a sharing, learned experience if you have that culture where you're not trying to hide it, you're not trying to feel bad about it. And I mean, there could be some things, because I think those are the small things that add up to eventually a big thing happening. So if
Yeah.
you tackle these little things at a time, where it feels like everyone's kind of in maybe it's built into the DNA of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the resilience and being able to pivot. Like if an employee fell for something new, then and they report that in a timely manner, you're able to say, okay, well, we need to monitor for this type of stuff now and add it into our checks and help prevent it in the future. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have a confession, you guys. In my past life as a teacher, I fell for a phishing test and I was so embarrassed. As soon as I clicked the link, this like fish on a hook popped up. I was like, oops, you fell. And I was so mortified, and I had to do a whole training on, cybersecurity and whatnot. But it kind of just made me think, Russell, when you were like, people shouldn't feel ashamed and all of that if they do make a mistake. The shame I felt was horrible. And again, this was my past life. I hope to never make that mistake again now that I work here and I just have a much different perspective on those things. But yeah, confession, I have fallen for phishing.
Yeah, but that brings up a good point that like these attackers are not just going after like Forbes 500 list, right? They're like you were a teacher in a like smaller school district. Like, yep. Yes, that was a phishing test, but that IT assuredly implemented these phishing tests because somebody actually fell for an actual phishing attempt, right? And it's like there's no rhyme or reason or why or who they're going to attack. It's they're going to try and find as much information and exploit as much as possible from whomever.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point, Russell, because I think there's plenty of smaller businesses that may think that they're not going to be a target because they're too small. Yeah. And so just this concept of every business and anyone really, even just personally protecting your data, protecting personal information. I work with grandparents on this because I feel like they're such an easy target for these sorts of things today. But I think that's a really good point that you made, that it's not just these huge companies that are targets. Like any business should be considering this and taking it seriously.
I do have I do have positive vibes about this because I do involved in the sales process here and trying to find out what businesses want. Very often when we say, here's a security suite, and one of the things I typically always ask is, does that include security testing and training like phishing? And we say, yes, it does include that. It's part of our package. Because I think I think businesses and leaders are starting to understand that this is a really important component of that, so that's good.
You're absolutely right. They are. I feel like in the past 2 to 3 years, we're getting less and less pushback on these extra tools to help with the training. Whereas prior to that, it was, well, I don't know if we need that. Like, let's hold off. And then they get phished and they'd wonder why, what they could do, how they could prevent it. And we just pivot back to, well, we need to do training. So
yeah.
Now I'm realizing we're saying phishing a lot. Just in case there is someone listening who's like, what is phishing? Can you just kind of briefly go over what that even means and what that attack is like?
Okay, so phishing is the act of getting a user to give up their credentials. And what will happen is the attacker will impersonate a company or, your Apple ID reset link, right? And thanks to modern day web and every company trying to make things easier, like Gmail, for example, when you get an email, it doesn't usually show you who the email's from on first click. It will present to you like the first name and last name. And so they'll change it to impersonate whatever company they're trying to come across as. And they'll build, highly sophisticated HTML emails that look authentic and real, and clicking those links will take you to obviously not apple.com or their reset links, but another website, and you fill in all of the information and they now have your password and username, right? Things to do to protect against it, multi-factor authentication is always important for literally everything. And I remember the slow adoption of things getting multi-factor authentication that was not SMS based, talking about banks here. Um, text message MFA is so easily intercepted by law enforcement or, private attackers. It's not a secure way to do things, but especially in the banking industry, you have such a slow adoption of security. I recently just changed banks, and it's the first one that I've ever found that will let me do an authenticator app and not an SMS.
Oh, cool.
And I frequently change banks as for like sign up bonuses and things like that, right? And I'm just shocked that they have it. But yeah, so phishing it's just a way to get those credentials from the user and then figure out what they can get from that, right?
Yeah.
Interesting, Russell, is that we, as a company, we had a bank for quite a number of years, and we kept on asking for multi-factor authentication, and they didn't have it. We moved banks now because of other reasons too, but we moved banks because we wanted a more secure platform, meaning where all your money is. And so, I think, if we're talking about companies, but I think it's also important to think about the people you do business with, the vendors that you and what's important to you to protect you personally, not just as and they may. I mean, I always like to go, I'd like to come into your business and help you with this because you're a bank and you don't have this and whatever. So I often, that's something it's really important to me that if they're presenting me with a really inadequate security platform for me to do my business, then I'm not going to use them.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back, the Target breach. Like, how many American citizens had to go and sign up for credit monitoring? Yep. And like, literally, it was a whole fiasco that extended for years after. Right, people felt that shock for a long time, and unfortunately, it is incredibly difficult to silo yourself out from all of the security holes that you might face from another company leaking your data. And we could turn this into a political podcast and really talk about that, but let's not do that.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the frustrations that can come up when adopting this level of security for your business, as far as like needing these extra sign-in and kind of checkpoints along the way. Do you, or Bryon, do you have any suggestions about how leadership can do this in a way to kind of make it a positive experience or as positive as possible?
Yeah, I mean, people like money, right? They're incentivizing the program of saying, hey, if you pass like your phishing tests, like here's a small bonus, like nothing huge, just like good job. Or even if you catch an actual phishing attempt, being able to say, this employee saved us, $10,000 in this check being redirected. Like, we're going to give them like $1,000 gift card or something. Like,
yeah,
that's a huge savings, like right off the bat, right? And it, annoyingly, we live in a capitalist society. It puts people in that mindset to be like, I'm going to look for it because I'm going to go after that, right, that incentive. And I don't think it's in a like a malicious or silly way, but like that's how our brains work, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, I thought of something else. I mean, in that area that if people don't want multi-factor where they have to put a second pin in or an authenticator app, but I think it can be that inconvenience can be negated if you do what they call a single sign-on for multiple apps. So we have we have all these different the world is full of these SaaS apps. Everybody's got an app, and we use them every day to our business. There's a banking app and a Microsoft 365 or whatever. There's like maybe 15 apps that we use, and if you can support that as an organization, say, well, we'd like to have them all authenticated in a similar way. You only have to multi-factor once, and it covers all these apps, and you're secure, and they're all tied in a very secure way. I think the one step overshadows all of the multiple steps I'd have to do every day to do this. So there's some things that you can make it. If you really think about it in a bigger picture, it's kind of like you talk about the building the house. You like build your house. Here's where we're going to do it. And it does. You don't have to. You don't have to lock the bathroom with a deadbolt and a whatever, because this one lock is going to be pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I self-host a ton of services for myself and my partner. And for years, there was in the self-hosted community, there was really never a featureful, like, single sign-on solution. So all of these services that I run are just, there's a username and password for every single one, right? And none of my services were ever exposed to the internet, so it was totally fine for me. But it was tedious and annoying to like use them and authenticate. But now there's a pretty solid self-hostable SSO solution that all these apps that I use found out about it, and they were like, well, we're going to add support for it, because it just simplifies the process greatly and gives you that, you might think like, oh, it's not as secure because you got that one point of entry. Like if they get that, then like they can really do some damage. But that's where you put those conditional access policies in place for that sign-on service, and you have a very strong authentication system that prevents this stuff, right?
Yeah, there's a phrase I heard in security world or security area that's like, you can put all your eggs in that one basket and watch that basket really carefully, right? Like if people like to have, well, I just in case I want to do this different things, but if that I don't know who puts eggs in a basket anyways, but it's very secure, right? And so you get all those features.
Yeah, I mean, it's one place to look, and one place to really just cut off all access if something bad does happen. You can revoke a token or force sign out on literally every sign in that is using that. So it's fast, it's helpful.
So when we're talking about cybersecurity and empowering your team, empowering your employees, would you say this is like a once a year, everybody takes a test sort of thing? Like, what does best practice actually look like? Because in my experience, in my past life, that's what it was. It was a box that was checked. Everybody take this test. Clearly it didn't work because I fell for the phishing test. But that was my experience. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are and really what best practice looks like for empowering your team.
Yeah, I mean, you can't romanticize cybersecurity training. It is so boring. And nobody really wants to do it more than once a year, but you should. Like, you should absolutely do it probably quarterly. Most people go for the once a year thing to check that we did the training for our cyber insurance, right? And then they have to give it to their employees every year. Everybody needs to refresh it. But I'm not saying like everybody has to go to a meeting every quarter in the conference room to do this, but using modern tools like phishing simulation, you can really target those people who need that additional training, right? So Jess would now not fall for phishing anymore. And so she wouldn't have to go and do a 5-minute little video and 3-question test on like what you should do with suspicious emails. But, Lisa in accounting might have to do it every quarter because she's just gullible, right? So that's how I would focus on the training, and it really just keeps it in everyone's mind and fresh. And we've had a lot of great luck with implementing that in the past couple of years for clients, and seeing just the amount of reported phishing go up, right? Which is great. You should never think that you're annoying somebody by having to report something. Like, I would much rather you report something that turns out to be legitimate than you clicking it and it not being legitimate, right? Like I would rather do the 10-minute inspection of like, no, this seems fine. Like, this is good. You can have this back and release it from quarantine than like dealing with the fallout of it not being legitimate. Yeah.
I wonder if I mean we're largely a technical organization, and one of the things I think that's been valuable for us, that maybe the listener maybe can apply to them, is we do every 2 weeks we have a tech talk, and basically if somebody's like, oh, it's during lunch, bring your lunch, someone's going to talk about something, and sometimes they're security related, sometimes there are other things, but I think I mean, when we go to these, I find people from our accounting department, our HR department, like people are there just listening and learning, and it's not formal training, but you're hearing it from the experts. And so if you're an organization that has somebody who has some knowledge about this, and you want to make training a little more less onerous, maybe you could just like, okay, we're gonna have a series of lunch and learns, or either come to the conference room or do it. We do ours through Teams. You could just do little things like that to add up. And not maybe there should be perhaps some sanction training, but I think constant awareness and constantly talking about these things they can go a long way. It just puts people, it's in the front of their mind that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you bring up a good point though. Like, we do all of these via Teams, which we haven't really discussed the shift of modern day remote work, right? So you're really, most companies have that on-prem infrastructure of the office, and like that's the attack point, right? But now it's really not, like I'm here at my house, like I'm a separate attack vector for whomever might be targeting us, right? So doing good policies that really require like enrolled devices, and don't let Lisa at accounting use her personal MacBook to sign into all of her stuff, can go a long way in strengthening your security posture.
Yeah, no, that's important. And you mentioned something else, Russell, that is important, and something that I realized we have established here that I didn't have in my previous role. And that is knowing who to go to report these things, and having a very clear process, laid out in a foundation before you're even testing and implementing everything, is making it very clear to every employee in any department, who's kind of heading this and who is going to take over if you have something to report, and making sure that that's really clear so that people do know. And hopefully you're able to communicate just like you did, Russell, where it's like, please bother me, if you will, like please let me know. I'd rather that than you be concerned, oh gosh, I don't know if this is something, especially if it's new to you and it's not something you're used to looking out for. And because like you said, they're getting so sophisticated, they are getting really good at making these emails and these outreaches look very legitimate. And so just kind of driving that home to people of like, let's just make a culture where we are just very transparent and open with our communication, and able to reach out to Russell and say, hey, can you check this out for me? Like, I don't know about this. And know that Russell's not going to be rolling his eyes like, oh my gosh, here she is again.
Yeah.
I think is really important as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You bring back up they're getting so sophisticated. Like, I almost fell for one the other month or last quarter or something, but it was a phishing simulation. Almost fell for it. I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is good. This is really good. And I share an office with a coworker, and I just looked over at him and was like, yeah, that one's pretty good looking. Like, I almost fell for it. If I wasn't in the habit of I just delete everything, then I probably would have clicked it. Yeah.
Well, and I've seen people sharing within Slack, like, hey, look at this one. This one's pretty gnarly, and like sharing that internally. So we do have this like really great source of communication where it's like, has anyone else gotten this email? Has anyone else seen this? We were even getting texts from Bryon asking for these gift cards. And so being able to immediately go on Slack and see like, oh my gosh, 4 or 5 of my coworkers also got this random weird text. And Bryon being able to say, nope, definitely wasn't me, is really helpful to have those lines of communication and for people to know where to go to do that communication.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a good point though, with discussing it in a third party environment, right? Like we discussed these things that come up in Slack. A lot of people that I've worked with in the past will just forward the email on, which is just not good. Just don't do that. Forwarding an email does a lot of things on the back end. And one of those is like adding a little ticker to the accountability of that email, right? Because the computer and the software has really no way to tell that, like, oh, they're forwarding this because they think it's a bad email, right? And so you add to that reputation score. And then you also run the risk of somebody clicking that link to see like what it is, right? So screenshots are much better for trying to say like, hey, this seems weird, right? But yeah, don't forward a suspicious email.
I will say too, I've also encountered them, and I'm also impressed with the sophistication and the fact that they look like. I mean, they've researched me somehow to know enough about me. I might be a bigger target because of my role, and so like, wow, they really tried hard. And so it makes me also think, we have some things in place. We can through our mail app, through Outlook, I can click on a button that says phishing, and it goes to, and it reports it and that stuff like that. What I wonder though is, maybe Russell, you have a perspective on this, is that how much, I don't, part of me, I'm getting so used to, we have such great security protocols in place that maybe I assume most people have those, and our customers may have some of those, but there are customers out there, or businesses out there, I should say, that don't have they don't have an IUVO, they don't have a really good technical team, and so we talked about like, oh, you should have a lunch and learn and have your technical team. If they don't have that, you know, I'll say just we can help you with that. We can guide you. If whether you're a client or want to be a client or need help with security, we can do that. But if not, we could just we're kind of sharing people like, hey, listen, if you don't want to, if you want this, we'll just share it, because the more you make everyone secure, everyone's better off. So we could, anybody listening to this and says, I'm not quite sure what to do, you can reach out to us. We can send you some guidelines that you can do on your own, that kind of thing too.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally a good idea. Like, even if it's just a one pager on our website or something, just like,
Yep.
Here are some things you can do if you can't afford us, right? Like,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we don't want to gatekeep that knowledge
Yeah.
for other businesses. But that kind of is a perfect segue into my next question, which is, what are some quick wins that business leaders could, actions that they could take for some quick wins when it comes to cybersecurity for their business? If they're really not doing much right now, maybe they have antivirus software or something. What would you say are some foundational things for them to start doing Monday morning?
Oh, man, so many things that are just incredibly easy to do. If you're using SSO with Microsoft, like enforce MFA with a modern authentication type, TOTP codes, FIDO2 keys, things like that, right? And just deal with the fallout. So TOTP codes they're essentially time-based authentication codes, right? So every 30 seconds you get a new code. You've definitely seen these before in your Microsoft Authenticator app.
Yep.
They're not SMS based, right? So they're generating on that device, and you get a new one every 30 seconds, right? FIDO2 keys are, a more modern authentication type. They are a physical device. I have one here that the multi-factor authentication is required from this device. And so it's kind of something with the password, and then something you own and physically to get that second factor authentication. And these are by far going to be the strongest one, even though you think well, it's a physical device, somebody could just steal this. It is also locked with a PIN that you should only know, and then you have to plug it in and touch it and to get the access. And modern password managers have adopted pass keys, which are super strong and basically FIDO2 authentication in a software version, right? So it's kind of helping spread that adoption of MFA via FIDO2. But yeah, enforce MFA and deal with the fallout of people not being able to authenticate, and then just help them set it up, right? Like you might have 10 minutes in the morning where Mary can't get into Microsoft because she doesn't have an authenticator app. It takes no time to tell her how to set it up. And then SSO everything with your IDP, like Microsoft, right? Like Bryon was saying, get everything you can authenticated behind SSO with Microsoft, so you have that one egg basket to look at for any authentication sign-ins.
Now, is that as simple as like a setting if they are a business that's using Microsoft, or do you need someone like Iuvo to help with that? Like, how do you even get that enacted?
Yeah. It is not just a setting. It is a small configuration. They don't take much time. Essentially, you create a sign-in application in Microsoft, and you tell it what URLs are allowed to use this sign-in token connection to your SAML provider, and you exchange a certificate between the two so that the communication is encrypted and they know that they're speaking to each other properly. And then when you click sign in like your software, it will redirect you to Microsoft to do the authentication, and then it passes back the acceptance and approval to that application, and then lets you in. Right? That is a very high overview of how it works.
Good enough for me. Thank you.
Most IT departments would be able to set these up. They can be a little bit confusing if it's something you're just getting into, and you can always call us and we can help you out. Right? And then, lastly, I'd probably say start doing phishing simulations. They're very easy to set up. They're not even that expensive if you just want to use the Microsoft's canned solution, which are very good. But there are other programs out there that you could use that are also easy to set up and easy to schedule and good reports and things like that.
No, that's great advice. And I will list that in the show notes as well, so that it's just super easy for people to grab that information. One last thing that we didn't really touch on much, and honestly, I'm thinking we could probably have a whole nother episode on, is that you can actually have security issues from the inside. So when you're thinking about like offboarding an employee, maybe they're disgruntled, maybe they're not really happy with how that went. And so do you have any, insight or tips on security from the inside from your own employees?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I see in terms of like an exiting employee is somebody will request that the account stay active. And just don't do that, right? Because I'm going to forget that somebody was let go 3 months ago and we still have that account active because somebody else wanted to like view their mailbox content or their OneDrive or something like that, right? And we are very good here about not letting that happen. Like we'll just tell them no, and we'll transfer all that data to that person, right? So you don't need to sign in as this person to go view it. Like we're just going to merge it into your stuff, right? That's the biggest form of like an account compromised from somebody leaving, right? And then another thing is just not informing IT in time or in a timely manner at all that somebody was let go. That's big with like contractors for companies, right? Like a company would hire a contractor, they would get an actual account on their Microsoft tenant and have access to their stuff, but whomever is the manager for that contractor would not let us know in a timely manner that like, oh, well, their contract term is up. They haven't been here for 6 months, right? But this account's been active the whole time, and who knows what's been going on with it or who still has access to it. Did that contractor keep their computer signed in? Do they still have purview into their SharePoint, seeing new data coming in, right? Like it's always important to tell somebody that somebody's leaving, especially that somebody being the people controlling the keys to it.
Yeah.
And it's always awkward. Like you don't want to know about somebody getting canned, but like you still have to do your job and like lock things down, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, being in IT for 30 plus years, I mean, it's usually, IT in a trusted organization, even as just a person who's working an IT person, you generally know before that person knows, and it is, I'm so sorry, I'm sad. Mary from accounting is going, whatever. But since you use that example, but I think that because of the things we talked about earlier, some of the things like the single sign-on or if you do it correctly, one click and everything's locked down, right? So you don't have to worry about it as much. You have to know what they have access to, and not everything is going to work that way. So you have to have this, I think when you're onboarding somebody, you have to make sure that you're offboarding them in the same way. But I found that in those situations, it's not only good for the company, but it's also can be good for the employee. So if something weird happens, they go, "Oh, what happened there?" They can't blame the employee because they're gone, right? They're like, "Okay, we've done this properly. That person is no longer with us, but we feel confident that this really weird anomaly is not happening because of that."
Yeah. And to help with that offboarding, like I'm a huge fan of this is my device, not yours. I don't have work email on this. I don't have work documents on this. Like this is mine. So you can cut off, so many of those security holes by just not having it on your own device, right?
Right.
And I'm fortunate enough that in my job nothing's ever on fire or an emergency, and I need to make sure that I'm connected after 5 p.m. to see everything. Like if something does go wrong, I will get notified. Just it's not going to like I'm not constantly thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
But not everybody is, and some people are, they have to have their work email on their phone, and that's a worry of IT when an employee does get let go of like how do we extract this data off of their device, right?
Well, I mean, so this is probably not the whole subject of this podcast, but mobile device management, it's like, I'm the opposite. I want to be able to work from wherever I need to do and answer something and move a barrier if wherever I am. So I have my work email. So if I left, you could, Russell, you'd say, "Oh, Bryon left, and we're gonna take that access off his phone, and it's not gonna hurt my phone. It's just gonna take all my access of things away." And I think that there's ways there are ways to do that as well.
Yeah, and that's come a long way too. It just in the past 5 to 10 years of mobile device management and how it works. So, I remember when it first became a bigger thing, and it was like, well, you're going to wipe the person's phone, right? Like, and people were very reluctant to do that because how many years of photos and data do they have on there of the kids growing up or whatever. But Microsoft has really good policies with Intune to just do app protection, and you can literally just control the Microsoft based data, right? So if an employee leaves, I just disable access to those apps, and then all their personal stuff is safe. So I have seen pushback on adopting MDMs because everybody still remembers the like, well, I don't want you to have access to my phone, right? Or to wipe my data. But it's grown a lot, and it's a lot safer to use in terms of keeping your own stuff safe from deletion. So
Russell, I feel another episode coming where we may need to have you back to kind of talk and dig in a little bit more on that, just because, like you said, the remote workforce is huge now, and being able to think about security from that standpoint and all the different users you have using their personal devices and things like that. I think it would be great to have more time to kind of chat about that a little bit further. But since we are towards the end of time, we'd like to end with our new guest by asking for an interesting fact about yourself, maybe something that we don't even know about you.
I think this one will shock you.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah. I am a published poet.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where can you see your work?
You haven't. Yeah. I won a contest in like 4th grade or something.
That's amazing.
And yeah, I am a published poet.
That is very
Wow.
cool.
All right.
I love that. Kudos to your
Wow,
coaches
that's
for
amazing.
helping with that too.
Yeah.
That is really neat.
It's very hysterical because my partner, she's getting her PhD, and every time she talks about something to write a book, I'm like, well, I'm already published. So.
Framed on the wall to autograph it for her.
Yeah. It's nothing, but it's very funny. Yeah.
That is really cool. I love that. I love that fun fact.
Maybe you can share it with us sometime, your poet. Oh.
You know, I know what the poem's about. I can't remember what it was. I believe my grandparents bought the book whenever it came out, but they're the only ones I know of with a copy. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that'd be cool for a tech talk. Russell, like a poetry session with Russell.
I'll just do a little slam poetry reading of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
No.
I'm feeling it.
That's great.
No.
All right. Well, that wraps up today's episode of Edge of Excellence. Today was a reminder that real cybersecurity starts with people, with the culture you create, the trust that you build, and the way that you empower your teams. If you'd like to learn more about how Iuvo helps organizations strengthen their cybersecurity, you can visit iuvotech.com. You'll also find this episode and all our past and future conversations there.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Russell. And until next time, stay secure, stay connected, and keep leading at the edge.
We hope today's insights empower you to shape your future and rise to your full potential. Let's continue to grow, innovate, and lead, pushing the boundaries of excellence.